I warned that red states would come for IVF, and now they have. But they aren't just going to stop in Alabama. Mark my words, if we don't act now, it will only get worse. That's why tomorrow I'm headed to the Senate floor to call on my colleagues to pass, via unanimous consent, my Access to Family Building Act.
All right, as I said, they often leave out a few facts. In this case, they left out a lot of facts. In fact, there's very little truth in what she had to say, other than that she's going to the floor tomorrow in the Senate to try to ram through the Access to Family Building Act. All right, this is Senate Bill 3612. That's why you have the phone number. You need to call your senator and tell them to oppose this bill. Because, first off, as we just talked about, IVF is not under assault. The court's decision dealt with a civil case. The legislature's not doing anything there to prohibit IVF. The court's decision didn't do anything to prohibit IVF. But let me tell you what this bill would do. All right? This bill that Tammy Duckworth was quacking about today, what she is going to advance is legalizing human cloning. Yes, that's in the bill. Human cloning, which is expressly prohibited in several states. All right, it legalizes gene editing, or so-called designer babies, again, which is outlawed and prohibited in many states because it's not right. She also legalizes the creation of human-animal chimeras. These are hybrids, all right? This is a form of experimentation on human embryos. There has been a big battle over the years to try to totally prohibit that at the federal level. It's been done at the state level because it's like Frankenstein. That's what we're talking about here. It also legalizes surrogacy nationwide, including commercial gestational surrogacy, which is expressly prohibited in several states. This practice can lead to the exploitation and of women and girls in particular. This legalizes the buying and the selling of the destruction of human embryos as reproductive genetic materials. In my home state of Louisiana, going all the way back to 1986, prohibits that. All right, so they see this as an opportunity to advance their radical anti-life agenda. That's what this is about. All right, 202-224-3121, Capitol Switchboard. Call your two senators and tell them to oppose Tammy Duckworth's bill. It's really the Frankenstein bill. It's not the family bill. That's what it's about. Joining me now to talk more about this, David Closson, director of our Center for Biblical Worldview here at the Family Research Council. David, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Hey, great to be with you as always, Tony.
So there are moral and spiritual, theological implications here with this. Now, IVF has long been controversial because, as we were just talking about with Eric Johnston, it is not regulated, and therefore, for instance, a couple may go in and they go through the treatments, and it's not just one or two embryos. Sometimes it could be a dozen or more, and those excess embryos are frozen or destroyed.
No, that's right, and that's why Christian ethicist, Tony, I'm working on a PhD in ethics, so I guess I could call myself an aspiring ethicist, but kind of there's a long history within Christian ethics of looking at IVF and saying that it's morally fraught. And one of the reasons particularly is that often when you go through a cycle, as they're called, of IVF intrafertilization, usually it's a dozen, maybe even more embryos. Now, as Christians, we believe that at conception, when that sperm and egg come together, you have a human being. And you do. You have unique DNA, you have the genetic code, you have everything. But then what happens is they selectively choose which ones to implant in the woman, and then the others are stored in freezers. We have, Tony, today millions of frozen embryos in freezers all over the country. And so I think that's important to acknowledge. But really what this, to me, this whole kerfuffle in Alabama has revealed is really the worldview of the left, which is a worldview of death. And they're really running with this like they ran after the Dobbs decision. And I think we need to be aware of that.
I mean, there's a little bit of hypocrisy here on the left, and I would say even on the right. Now, I would say this is why we have to get this right. I do think there needs to be regulation over the IVF clinics because, as you say, it is fraught with problems. Just because science enables us to do something doesn't mean we should do it. I mean, we should be concerned about both the means and the ends of where this would lead us. And it needs to be guided by biblical truth, by morality, as you said, ethics. The problem we're seeing today, in the absence of moral truth, there are no ethics that are standard and steadfast. It's a wild, wild west morally.
It is. And you know what's so interesting, Tony, looking at this is a lot of the kind of hand-wringing on the left, so to speak, isn't actually on the majority decision that came out of Alabama. It's a concurring opinion that the Chief Justice wrote. And what's interesting with the Chief Justice, he really did explore kind of the concept of sanctity of life. That phrase, sanctity of life, appears in the Alabama Constitution. So just being a good lawyer, he kind of said, where did these words come from? What do these words mean? And so he explored the Christian tradition of understanding sanctity of life, image of God. And he, it was so funny, Tony, for me reading the New York Times write-up on this, where they said, this Chief Justice was quoting 16th century dead theologians, like John Calvin and whatnot. Well, he was, because Christians have been thinking about these issues for a very long time. It's not that we just thought of these in a right-wing think tank last week. We've been thinking deeply about these issues for centuries, Tony, and one of those principles is a high view of life that every single person is made in God's image.
Transcendent value. It's not value assigned to it. It is value that is inherent in it because it is created in the image of God. I think we may have stumbled onto something here with this and with this clip I'm about to play, is that the left has controlled our educational institutions for so long that these foundational ideas now seem to be foreign. Let's play clip number 8.
The thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God. The problem with that is that they are determining men, are determining what God is telling them.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think I actually read that in one of our documents. Oh, that's right, the Declaration of Independence. So we have a reporter here, Politico. This was Heidi Presabella. She was just saying that these Christian nationalists believe that. This goes back to what you were saying about the New York Times writing, this is some kind of ancient writing here. This is consistent with the worldview and the writings of our founders and the foundational documents of this country.
It is, Tony. And so that Politico author right there, who was on MSNBC, I have no doubt that she was very sincere in what she was saying.
But she was sincerely wrong.
She believed that she was revealing, if you played the Fuller clip, she even says that I've consulted with experts. She says, I've consulted with experts and realized that Christians believe, she actually says not Christians, but the so-called Christian nationalists believe that rights don't come from the Supreme Court or Congress, but they come from God. Well, my goodness, who knew that Thomas Jefferson was a raging Christian nationalist? That's news to me.
We need to go back and change some of those history books if that's the case. But this, either either there is a deficit of understanding and of knowledge among the elite in this country, or they think that the general populace is so ignorant of their past that they can get by with this.
It's probably both, honestly, Tony. And I think this gives us an opportunity, because also what Heidi did in that later in the clip, she invokes what she called the so-called natural law. Well, my goodness, the natural law, again, is centuries of Christians thinking. Now, as a Protestant, I believe in special revelation is most important, God's revealed word through the Bible. But we also believe in natural revelation, that God reveals himself.
It's the moral law, the natural law. Paul writes about this in Romans chapter 2. It's inscribed on the hearts of man. So this has long been a part of our judicial system, our legal system, our understanding of the law. In fact, I remember when Clarence Thomas was before the Supreme Court, or before the Congress, the Senate, to be confirmed. This was a big issue back then. Yeah. And so we've seen for decades now the left trying to repudiate and remove the whole concept of natural law, replacing it totally with positive law, yes, which is man-made law that can be whatever you want, and it's kind of like moving morals away from the gold standard. Right. Because once you move it away from the gold standard, you can do whatever you want to it. That's what we've done with our economy. That's what we've done with our currency. That's what you do with morals, with positive law. You move it away from any anchored truth.
Yeah, and let's be clear, you quoted Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. He talks about unalienable rights. We need to realize what the founders realized is that government doesn't grant rights. It merely recognizes rights. It secures those rights. It defines those rights, but it doesn't grant any rights. These are rights that are inherent, that they were given to us by the Creator. And again, there's many of our founders, a lot of them were believers, some of them were not, some were deists. They all had this understanding. And even before them, this is the English common law tradition. And so I think Heidi in that clip probably thought she was revealing some really, deep hidden conspiracy among the right wing that we believe these things. And it's just, I almost pity her that this lack of historical understanding.
This is I go back, you were talking about the New York Times, talking about the Alabama decision. So this is not like a one-off. This is not an outlier. This has now become the mainstream media, and the worldview has been revealed. And I think it's becoming clearer and clearer. So with that in mind, David Closson, how should we as believers in the 21st century respond to these very serious issues? Because our future is more determined by what we believe our past and foundation to be than what it really is. And so if we're being deceived about who we are as a people and our foundation and this fundamental understanding of rights, we can be led who knows where. We can. So blocks from where we're sitting right now, Tony, is the National Archives building. Right outside, they have a statue that says, "The past is prologue." And what they're inviting people is come learn about the documents, look at the Constitution, look at the Declaration of Independence, look at the Bill of Rights, understand why we have these documents, what they mean, what they've historically mean. And it's true, past is prologue. So we need to understand our past. We need to understand our history. What it really is.
Absolutely. And as Christians, we need to understand the whole storyline of Scripture, from creation, fall, redemption, restoration. So we need to know our own history. We also need to know biblical history. And I think as we do that, we'll be able to recognize when someone on MSNBC says something that's crazy, we'll be able to understand that.
But it goes beyond just understanding. Understanding is the first step, but having the confidence of that understanding gives us the ability to push back and say, no, this is not true. It is not right. It is false. And we need to start calling out a lie for what it is. It is a lie.
Absolutely. Well, what is wisdom? Wisdom is rightly applied knowledge. And so I think we need to know the right answer, and then we do need to apply that, and we need to embody that. And I'm flying to Alaska tomorrow to speak to some pastors, Tony. We need to, especially our leaders, need to be teaching this to our people in our congregations.
Well, unfortunately, it's not salmon season, so I guess you won't be fishing. David Closson, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.